Hi, and welcome to the Newbery Chronicles. This is a podcast where two readers go through every Newbery Medal winning book and then we talk about them. I am Michael.
And I'm Rebecca.
And this time, we're talking about the 1986 winner, Sarah Plain and Tall by Patricia MacLachlan. I mispronounced her name at the end of last episode, but look how far I've come in the intervening weeks. Sarah Plain and Tall is a very short book. Rebecca predicts that we have a very short podcast. Time will tell.
Yep.
Would you like to tell us what you've read this intervening time since our last podcast?
Yes.
Rebecca?
I have read two books since we have last recorded a podcast. I read Dear Edward by Anne Napolitano. If you've been listening, you know that I also read Anne Napolitano's Hello Beautiful and really loved that. I also love this book, which is probably her most popular book. I will say I loved Hello Beautiful more. And I did not know I would be listening to Dear Edward right before I got on an airplane. And this is not giving a spoiler away to say that this book is about a plane crash. But I had not dug into what this book was about before I got on a plane. But basically, Edward, the character...
The titular Edward.
Right, thank you. Is the only surviving passenger from a plane crash. And I think he's 12 when the plane crashes. Both his parents die, his older brother dies. And then all of these obviously all the other passengers on the plane. So the book goes back and forth to like the moments before the plane crash and then the present day of Edward growing up. He goes into the care of his aunt and uncle, and then throughout the book receives all these letters from people whose loved ones died on the plane, asking him to do certain things in their memory, or to not waste your life, or to know this about this person. So he's really just trying to grapple with not only being a survivor, but also like, what does that mean in terms of all the other lives that were lost, and how does he go about living in the world, knowing all of that. I think it was a really beautiful book. I think Napolitano is a very, very talented writer. I really enjoy her books. They're not only very engaging, but I think that they are very well written. So I have really enjoyed these two books so far, and I'm looking forward to reading more by her. I also read The Water Dancer by Ta-Nehisi Coates. This was... at this point is the only novel that Ta-Nehisi Coates has written. He's written a lot of essays, a lot of essay collection. He wrote a memoir. I don't know if you call it a memoir, but he basically wrote a memoir to his son about what it means to be a black man in America. Ta-Nehisi Coates, everything he writes is golden. Very, very talented author. Michael's actually going to talk about one of his books that he read as well. What I will say about The Water Dancer is I found it to be very engaging. It's about a man who is born into slavery, and his father is the slave owner. So he knows this about himself his whole childhood, and that gives him some leverage and power that other enslaved individuals don't have. He has, oh my goodness... He has this gift, I think it's called conduction, which allows him to, in very stressful situations, get out of those and travel, sometimes through time, but sometimes I was a little bit confused of what is happening. But basically, he meets Harriet Tubman and becomes a part of helping people get out of slavery, and also navigating his own role in this world with power and leverage that other people don't have. I thought it was a great novel. Like I said, Ta-Nehisi Coates is a beautiful writer. The prose was really good. I wished I had been reading it physically, because I think listening to it, there were parts that I wanted to like go back and re-understand. And
we have the physical book.
We do have the physical book, because I bought it for you.
Yeah, I read it years ago. I don't remember it very strongly.
I'm late to the game.
Did you feel like... So my memory of it is that as I was reading it, I got like... And there's no shade in this because this is a very wonderful author. But I very much felt like Ta-Nehisi Coates loved Toni Morrison, and that was like a formative influence on like how the book worked. But I also found that he's not as good a novelist as Toni Morrison. Yeah. So
I can definitely see that. I didn't think that when I was listening to it, but also I just think there's so much you lose in just listening, you know. But
did he read it?
Mm-mm.
Oh,
no,
see, that's another thing too. He has a great reading voice.
He does have a great reading voice. Whoever they got to read it, whatever actor that did read it, did a very good job. But yeah, I was kind of expecting to hear him, which he does read his nonfiction books, or at least he read The Message, because I listened to The Message, and he read that and was really well done, which is a great segue to you.
Yeah, for once, Rebecca only read 2 books. I only read 2 books as well, and I'll start with also the Ta-Nehisi Coates book that I read, which is called The Message, which is a nonfiction book by Ta-Nehisi Coates that came out, was it 2014? Or not 2014, 2024?
I was about to say. Nope.
Let me pull this up. 2024, and caused a bit of a stir because a large chunk of this book involves him writing about his travels to Palestine in 2023. And as we all know, people are famously very chill and very rational about Israel and Palestine, especially when people take a critical look at Israel, such as Ta-Nehisi Coates does. And so, like, there was some hubbub surrounding this book. I'm here to say, I'm going to put to rest all the naysayers. They're wrong. This is a wonderful book. Mm-hmm. Like most of what Ta-Nehisi Coates writes, it is structured into thirds, but there are unequal thirds. Like the longest part by far is the Palestine part. But he also travels to Senegal. And then he also travels to, what is the place in the American South that he travels to? I'm completely
one of the Carolinas, isn't it?
Blanking. Is South Carolina. Sorry. Mm-hmm. Thank you. And so Senegal, he goes as like a pilgrimage as a Black American, as kind of a mythical journey home, which Senegal kind of facilitates. There's a big tourist industry, it seems like, surrounding Black Americans going to Senegal as a kind of way of reversing the Middle Passage to the Atlantic, and you go and you can kind of experience like what is, the kind of lost connection you have with the continent of Africa. And so he spends a lot of time ruminating about his kind of conflicted feelings about being in Senegal as an American tourist, while also kind of like being very moved by the kind of symbolic weight of like being in the African continent and being in Senegal and being at like this kind of point where a lot of slaves, a lot of people who were enslaved ended up, leaving Africa never to return. And he kind of starts him thinking about a lot of the same issues that he's been thinking about a lot of his career, Black identity, the kind of like uneasy relationship he has with Black nationalism, which like the Senegal, back to Africa, like that sort of thing has he kind of, teases out like the kind of unsettling and ambivalent relationship he has with kind of back to Africa, which kind of handily aligns with like some white supremacist talking points, as well as also being meaningful for people who've been stolen from that continent, generations past. Then he also talks about going to Columbia, South Carolina, because one of his books, Between the World and Me, is a school board is attempting to ban it after a teacher.
Which is the book I was mentioning that he wrote to his son.
Yes. And so he goes there to support her. And then lastly, he goes to Palestine. And he kind of frames this as like, so he has this really famous essay called The Case for Reparations, which he wrote for The Atlantic, in which he talks about the case for reparations by the U.S. government to Black Americans, obviously because of the horrific and persistent effects of slavery on Black Americans. But in that essay, he talks about the state of Israel, and he uses it as a case study for reparations. And as a journalist, he immediately kind of feels weird about having use that as an example, because he is aware of some of the critiques of Israel. And so he travels to Israel, Palestine to kind of look and see, kind of process, how do I feel about Israel, Palestine? And the whole writing of this ends up being kind of a rumination of his role in propping up this mythology of Israel as like the only democracy in the Middle East and all that sort of stuff, when in fact it is like an apartheid state that reminds him very strongly of what he knows about the American South during Jim Crow. And he teases out all the ways that is and isn't the case. There's obviously differences, but like the kind of thing he keeps coming back to is if you are ethnically Jewish, you have a higher tier of citizenship than if you are Palestinian. And he is very critical of Israel for that. And he also explores a lot of the kind of self-mythologizing that Zionism has inside Israel, up to and including like the Museum of Tolerance was built upon a Muslim cemetery, for instance, and a Holocaust memorial is, or not a Holocaust memorial, excuse me. There's a kind of pseudo archaeological dig that claims to have found like the city of David, that like the King David in the Bible, was actually David's palace and stuff like that. And there's not a lot of archaeological evidence for this, but it is basically built in such a way that is like barred Muslims and Palestinians more broadly from accessing sites that are historically meaningful for them. And so in the same way that America propped itself up as this unique forward-thinking democracy while instituting at the same time as instituting Jim Crow, leader of the free world at the same time as being a place of abject segregation and inequality. He kind of teases out that same idea with Israel, and really starkly, and I think really effectively. A lot of people have critiqued him for he doesn't have any sort of critique of Hamas, or he doesn't have any sort of like ambivalence surrounding like a lot of the kind of, I guess you would say, like insurgent violence against the Israeli state. And I guess I would just say that I have heard him say in interviews surrounding this book, which is that perspective is so well trod in American media that he didn't feel the need to voice it. The point of this was to voice a counter narrative that he felt like was underrepresented. And he does statistics about like, of all the op-eds published in the New York Times and the Washington Post about Palestine, how many have actually been written by Palestinians? And it's like single-digit percentages. So anyway, I found this to be a very compelling book. It ultimately becomes a book about the stories we tell and a writer's role in either perpetuating or talking against the kind of prevailing narratives in our society. I thought it was wonderful. And honestly, if you're someone who has any sort of trepidation about, or any sort of doubt as to whether or not like Palestinians are being horrifically treated in some of the worst human rights abuses in the world, and a genocide enacted against the Palestinians, I would recommend this book because he talks very forcefully and very clearly about what is it that makes this situation so unjust. And also, as we talked about, he's just a wonderful writer. Just truly a wordsmith, above all else, I think. Maybe not above all else, but in addition to all else. The other book I read, very different. I think a couple podcast episodes ago, or maybe last podcast episode, I talked about having read Philip Pullman's La Belle Sauvage, which is the first book in this companion trilogy to his Dark Materials trilogy. And so I have finished the second one in this trilogy, which is called The Secret Commonwealth. And I, just like La Belle Sauvage, I read this way back when it was first published in 2019. And I mostly remembered it. Like it's pretty much how I remembered it. It jumps forward in time to after the events of his Dark Materials and follows Lyra, who's the protagonist of his Dark Materials, as she is trying to navigate her adult life at college. So she's like she lives at a college as a child for reasons that are more complicated than worth getting into. But she, as an adult, is enrolled as a student there, but the college is slowly being taken over by these kind of like business-minded bureaucrats who we learn are kind of extensions of the ideological project of the kind of villainous church body that has control over England in this alternative universe. And this is all connected with the same sort of like angst and control that they try to pose between humans and their demons, which in this universe is like basically your soul is like this animal that lives outside of you. And as an externalization of your soul, the authoritarian church leaders obviously want to have control over it. There's also movements that are trying to deny the existence of demons entirely and promote like a purely rational materialist point of view, which Lyra seems interested in, but that causes a rift between her and her demon because obviously her demon's like, no, I exist, I'm right here. And then eventually her demon runs away and they are separated, which is this really huge disgrace in her society. And so she's got to basically go find this demon while also kind of unspooling this murder mystery. A guy is seen to be murdered at the beginning of this book over what seems to be some research regarding roses, which may or may not connect to people's ability to see human consciousness. And it kind of goes from there. It's good. It's a lot of it is like it's almost like travelogue-esque, like a kind of adventure novel where Lyra and a few other characters are just traveling across like further east. She travels across Central Europe and then into Asia. By the end of the novel, in search of her demon and attempting to reach this maybe mythical, maybe real place called the Blue Hotel, where allegedly all the demons who don't have people anymore go and congregate. And somehow this is connected with the whole Rose conspiracy. There's not a ton of answers in this book because I think that they presumably get answered in the third and final book, which I've not read, but just came out last year, and I intend to read it soon.
Okay, so that's why you're rereading these.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I am rereading them because the last book came out, but I didn't remember these books enough. I mean, this book is good if you like Philip Pullman's kind of thing, and his thematic preoccupations. It's going to be interesting to you. If you're not interested in him, this is not the good entry point for it. Not the least of which is that it's almost 700 pages long. But I think it's very good. I mean, at this point, he's basically not writing children's books anymore. There's no reason why like this would appeal to like a middle grade, fan of like his dark materials, which is already kind of pushing it in terms of like, what is appealing to children. But this is like fully in adult territory,
So he's kind of writing books for the kids who read these when they were kids.
I mean, that's certainly who I am.
Yeah.
So, I guess so. And I think just like in terms of like what it's about, it's a lot less like fun, magical wonder stuff, and is a lot more about like politics and like these kind of mysteries that are more like, they're more like film noir-ish than they are like a fun mystery, because he has mystery books for children too, which I read a little bit of when I was a kid. But yeah, this is more for young adults or older, like, not young adults such as myself. Anyway, that's what I read recently. Just 2 books.
All right.
I managed to talk about them for a while, but
that's all right.
you know.
Why don't you talk to us about Patricia MacLachlan?
Yeah, so to pivot into Sarah Plain and Tall. So Patricia MacLachlan she's dead now, only recently dead, but she was born in 1938 in Cheyenne, Wyoming, to Philo T. Pritzkow and Madonna Pritzkow, which are just heck of a pair of names for your parents. There's no way that you can't go on to greatness.
Is MacLachlan her married name?
Yes.
Okay.
So Philo and
she should have
Madonna.
kept her.
Seriously, yeah. She was starting to publish in the 70s and 80s. I don't know if they wanted a Pritzkow. Anyway, her father was a professor of English, as well as, it seems, education, because later on in her her obituary that I read, it talked about her father having been in the School of Education. I don't know. He taught English. Her father actually lived to be 102, which I was really surprised that he only died in 2004.
Wow.
But anyway, he also wrote books. I couldn't figure out what they were called, except one that was called Growing Up in North Dakota, because he did grow up in North Dakota. Her mother was an English teacher as well, although when I get the sense, because she eventually became a homemaker, so I think that she probably stayed home with the kids when Patricia was born. I don't know if she has siblings or not. But according to Patricia later on, her parents were, quote, very liberal and very literate. There was no such thing as an unsuitable or a banned book in our household. And so as a child, she grew up with the love of reading, read very broadly. Also, even though she moved away from the Midwest when she moved away from the prairie states when she was 5, but she maintained a real sense. This kind of, these distant memories of the prairie played very heavily in her mind of like having been in Wyoming and North Dakota and all that sort of stuff. And I found this quote from her autobiography, which is called Something About the Author. And she said that the prairie landscape of those early years, quote, has always been a powerful source in my life, fueling my mind and my imagination and giving me a sense of belonging to a particular place. And apparently she always carried a bag of dirt from the prairie with her. And this is another quote, it's important to remember where I began, which I included because the book we're about to read takes place in the Midwest. But when she was 5, she moved to Rochester, Minnesota, which, does Minnesota count as the Midwest? It's a little vague to me. It doesn't seem like the same.
So
It just, Wyoming versus Minnesota, those seem like completely different regions to me. But I've also not been to either place. So
I have.
Well, as the resident Midwest scholar, I'll take your word for it. Anyway, after middle school, she moved to Connecticut because all authors on this podcast must eventually pass through Connecticut. And so she went to the University of Connecticut, which is where her father was teaching. And she graduated in 1962. And that was the same year that she also got married to a clinical psychologist called Robert MacLachlan, therefore her name, Patricia MacLachlan. And in 1963, she started teaching at a junior high in Manchester, Connecticut. And she taught at that junior high until 1979, when she stopped to write full-time. And somewhere in the midst of this, she also worked for a family services agency called the Children's Aid Family Service Agency. And so she did like publicity for them and also like worked interviewing foster parents. And I'm not exactly sure in what capacity she did all that, but she did that in addition to being a teacher. Along the way, she had 3 kids, and after her 3rd kid went off to school at the age of 35,
not the kid,
Patricia, when she was 35 and her kids were all at school, started writing. She first started writing picture books, and in 1979, she published her first book, which is a picture book called The Sick Day, which is apparently about this kid who's sick, and the father has to take care of the kid at home. Seems very sweet. She wrote a few more picture books until her editor encouraged her to write a novel. And her first novel was called Arthur for the Very First Time.
Which is great.
Well, did you know? So this was published in 1980. Did you know that there is a character in that book that is a mail-order bride? And apparently this mail-order bride, writing about her, inspired her to write Sarah Plain and Tall, which focuses on something of a mail-order bride a little bit. So I thought that was interesting. Overall, she wrote 60 books, some of which she wrote with her daughter, Emily. They wrote some picture books together. And she was quite acclaimed in her life. In addition to winning a Newbery Medal, she won the Christopher Award in 1986, I suppose also for Sarah Plain and Tall. She won the National Humanities Medal in 2002 for her collective contributions to children's literature. And in 2022, she died at the age of 84 in Massachusetts.
Didn't she also get the Scott Odell Award?
That might be true.
Yeah, for historical fiction.
For Sarah Plain and Tall?
and the Golden Kite Award. I don't
I
know
think
that
like
award,
I'm sure she won many awards. These were the ones that I saw in her obituary, which if anyone's interested in reading more about her, I would not recommend the Washington Post obituary, which was like a paragraph long. But what I would recommend is the Publishers Weekly obituary, which was about 10 paragraphs long and very informative.
They knew where it was at.
Yeah, the Washington Post can go... Anyway, they fired everybody. So anyway, moving on.
Before I summarize the plot of this book, I just feel I should tell all of our listeners what an important role Patricia MacLachlan has played in my life. As a child, she was one of my favorite authors. It was Patricia MacLachlan, Beverly Cleary, Betsy Byers, obviously Louisa May Alcott. But when I think about like those books that I would get at my school library and would read and devour, it was these women who are so formative in my childhood. I love Sarah Plain and Tall, which I would say is probably Patricia MacLachlan's most famous book.
I feel like it has to be, given that it won the Newbery, and it was the only one I've heard of. When I looked over her books, I hadn't heard any of the other ones.
My favorite is Baby, personally, which we also have here. It's definitely worth your time if you liked this book and are interested in this kind of very gentle storytelling about characters that feel vivid, but there's also so much space for your imagination for what happens between the conversations, a lot of beautiful imagery and strong sense of place. That is what she is so good at. And I know I'm talking about things I like before it's time for that. Patricia deserves our deep appreciation and care. And
we stand, Patty.
We really do. And I was very excited to read this book and also a little bit nervous because it's like, oh, what if it's not as good as I remember? It is better than I remember. It is better than I remember.
You really are getting into spoiler territory.
And so let me tell you about it. So, Sarah Plain and Tall, Michael and I had this joke that it's Sarah short and sweet, because it really is.
Truly,
that was like Michael's joke, not mine.
70 pages of large type. This could be, if it were published in an adult, like, for adults, this would be a short story.
But emphasis on sweet. So, this story, like Michael already alluded to, is set in the Midwest U.S. during the late 19th century. And there's a man named Jacob Whitting who is a farmer and has two children, Anna, his oldest daughter, his only daughter, and Caleb. His wife died in childbirth with Caleb, so he's been a widow for 7 years and puts an ad in the newspaper for a mail-order bride.
I can't decide if I think that that's wholesome, that that's a thing that a person does, or if it's weird.
That is the beauty of Patricia MacLachlan. There's so much room for exploration, but ultimately you find deep warmth in her stories.
Did people often put want ads for spouses back in the 19th century?
There's a whole link in the Wikipedia article for this idea, so we could explore that.
Bride.
But that is not good listening material, so let me continue to tell you about this book. So Sarah Wheaton, who is from Maine, answers this ad and decides to stay on their farm for 1 month as a trial period. So the kids are obviously nervous before she comes, but they pretty quickly fall in love with her. How could you not? Sarah is magnificent. They love her. They hope she'll stay. They notice that she's a little bit fiery. She is not a timid woman, but she is gentle. She is gentle. She is not timid, but she is gentle and lovely and spunky and fun and very interested in the farm. She is also very homesick. She misses Maine. The fields really remind her of the sea. She mentions the sea to them. They get really nervous because she wants to learn how to drive the wagon, and they're afraid that once she learns how to drive the wagon, she's not going to come back. There's like this day where she goes into town and they're nervous all day that she won't come back. And she does come back with presents. And that is really how the book ends, is that she misses the sea, but she would miss them even more. and then she and Jacob marry, and that is the end of the book. But, my friends, it is not the end of the story, because Patricia MacLachlan wrote several sequels to this book. The first one is Skylark, and then I have definitely read Skylark, and I believe I've read the third one.
Caleb's story.
Yes, I have read that one. She wrote another one after that.
More Perfect
She wrote
Than the
two
Moon.
more after that. She wrote More Perfect Than the Moon in 2004. I do not remember that one. And then Grandfather's Dance in 2006. So I am going to go back and read all of these. And also, another reason why this story has really stuck with me is because they made two movies. One off of Sarah Plain and Tall. They were made for TV movies. Glenn Close is in it.
Is she Sarah?
Mm-hmm. And Christopher Walken is Jacob.
That is, I mean, that's quite a cast.
It's well cast. It's so good. And it was one of those that I don't know if we watched it on TV, but I definitely remember, like, I think they were in my church library because I would check these books out, these movies out. Does he talk
like Christopher Walken normally talks?
I think he does. Like, it's weird. I don't remember. But we're going to watch these.
I would like to.
I have very fond memories of them. And then Skylark, Sarah takes Anna and Caleb to Maine with her. And you meet the crazy ants that she talks about in the book. And it's lovely. So before I gush over this book, Michael's going to talk about what he liked.
I also like this book too. I thought it was sweet, as Rebecca already said. And I feel like it's been a while since I complained about the prose in one of these books, but I often feel that some children's literature kind of skimps on the prose because they're like, it's for kids. Kids can't deal with poetry or literariness unless it's like really kind of bubbly, ebullient, like kind of stuff like Dr. Seuss, which I love. But, you don't get a lot of like lyricism in children's literature, even among award winners, such as the Newbery Award winners. However, this one does. This one is very, very lyrical. You will have just this like beautiful focus on like imagery, and particularly natural imagery, that will serve as like kind of metaphorical or like kind of mood setting for scenes, or like I mentioned a second ago, like metaphorical connections to something that's happened. And it's not flowery. It's very much like a straightforward telling of what is happening, but the selection of the words is so thoughtful and considered, where
there's no waste in language.
There's no waste. It is like it's what people might call like muscular prose, where it is very utilitarian and very to the point, while also being like very precise and beautiful in its spareness. And I actually found, I was trying to flip through, because it's very short, I was trying to flip through and find an example of what I'm talking about. And I found one late in the story. There's a big storm where there's a bunch of hail that comes down, and they all have to hide out in the barn, which the whole sequence is lovely. But they have to hide out in the barn, and then when they come out of the barn, we just get this. This is all it says, and the chapter ends. It says, "When it was over, we opened the barn door and walked out into the early morning light. The hail crunched and melted beneath our feet. It was white and gleaming as far as we looked, like sun on glass, like the sea." Which is just great. So
great.
Like that's...
and none of those words are words that a child would read this and not understand what they meant.
That's what I was getting to. It's not highbrow in the sense of like it is trying to elevate itself. It is simply telling a story on the level of its audience, but in a way that is like just very, very smartly done, very artfully done, and in a way that is literary in like that kind of obnoxious way that like people mean with literary, in the sense of like the words are weighted with significance. So like, I mean, all books are kind of literary by virtue of being literature, but like the specific aspirations of this are something that you really, I don't see that often for children's literature, which is to have this really thematically and stylistically compact book that gestures at these, lovely ideas.
But again, you know who does that well?
Patricia MacLachlan.
Patricia MacLachlan, Betsy Byers, Beverly Cleary.
Yeah, you had better childhood faves than I did. We can establish that.
You liked a lot of those. Well, you liked Beverly Cleary.
Yeah, I read Beverly Cleary. I will say, though...
It's because these books were geared towards girls.
I did read some books geared toward girls, but anyway, I will say that Beverly Cleary doesn't really do this. She has very insightful characters,
You're right.
But her prose is kind of standard children's lit prose. Whereas, like, this is almost the opposite. It's not that her characters aren't well considered, but rather than the characters coming out through incident and plot, which is like what Beverly Cleary does a really good job of, the characters are just... There's a really good eye for detail for these characters, and those details tell us a lot about the characters. It'll just be like a little off-the-cuff comment or a stray thought in the mind of one of these characters that really just gives us this very vibrant snapshot of who this person is psychologically in a way that's super efficient and doesn't really feel like... It feels a lot more like what I'm used to adult fiction doing. And I think it's very sophisticated, and children deserve that sort of thing, too.
They do. They do. And you know what? They appreciate it. Spoken from a child who appreciated it.
I will also mention Jarvis, our son, is not on this podcast today because he did not actually really like this book.
I think it was boring to him, and I get it. He did want to know what was going to happen, but he did say it was boring. He enjoyed The Rats of Netmore, which understandably, I didn't read this book when I was 7, so.
How old were you when you read it?
I don't remember.
Because I do wonder about that. Like, had I read this as a child, would I have found it interesting?
I associate Baby that I like so much with 6th grade, so I was older reading it, and I think I would have appreciated a story like this more at that age than when I was our son's age. So what I would say... Are you done?
Yeah, go ahead.
What I would say about this book is one of the reviewers, when I was looking at the Wikipedia page, called this like a gentle book. And I think that is such an apt description. Like, it is not a boring book. It is not an exciting book. It is a gentle book. It is a book that tells like these stories of these characters with care. And I just appreciated the pacing of it. I appreciate the cadence of the dialogue, but also the cadence of like the narration that I think mimics that kind of like slow and steady, but life is moving on. I think it really captures feelings of melancholy and loneliness in a very beautiful way. Not in a way that is all-consuming, but in a way that is honest and true. I think also that feeling of anticipation. You had that anticipation throughout this book. Like, this is really beautiful, but it could go away. Is this going to stay? What is going to happen? I think it's just perfect throughout. I also appreciate the way that you can see adults being adults, but through the eyes of a child, where they might not know the extent of like the argument that Sarah and Jacob have, but they know that there's tension there. They don't know why Sarah is going into town, but they know that there's something that she's not fully getting there on the farm, that she needs to go out and explore. And I think that MacLachlan just captures that really well through the eyes of a child, where you don't feel like it's an adult talking to you or telling the story, but you know there are real adults in it. I think Michael mentioned the imagery. She does a lot of comparison of the plains and the fields to like the waving of the sea, like the waves of the sea. And I just think this is a story that moves you and sticks with you in its very simple telling of it, and that's what I liked. Is there anything you disliked?
No, not really. I mean, it is very much what it is meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to fault a book for that. You know, what am I trying to say? It's like eating a single M&M, and you're like, was there anything wrong with that M&M? And it's like, no, I wouldn't want an M&M to be bigger or more than what this was. But I kind of feel like, I don't feel like we've exhausted what's good about the book.
Right.
But I do kind of feel like there's not much more to say about the book than what we've already said. And I wouldn't want it to be longer or more substantial or anything like that, because what it is this kind of like little compact thing that is just really, really well done and well executed. But I don't feel like I have that many smart things to say about it, because it is what it is. Like I said, like in terms of length, it is basically a short story.
Yeah, it's a slice of life. That's
very,
what it is.
Very slice of life. So I don't mean this to be damning with faint praise when I say it's not long enough for me to really have anything like negative to say about it.
I do want to, since Jarvis is not on, we should have asked him if he wanted to be on, because there was a part that he particularly enjoyed and was like talking about it for a long time afterwards. Caleb makes up this little song about woolly ragwort. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
And I made up a little song when we were reading it, and then Jarvis continued to sing the song throughout the night. So he was very tickled by that.
Yeah, woolly ragwort all around, woolly ragwort on the ground. Woolly ragwort grows and grows, woolly ragwort in your nose.
Yes, so we sang that and had a delightful time with it. So that was really fun.
I don't really know what woolly ragwort is. Anyway, so all that is to say, no, there's not anything that I disliked about it.
Neither did I. I think that this is a perfect book. I was hoping that we would have had time to maybe read Skylark and watch both the movies before we did the podcast, but we just have not had time since the time that we last recorded our podcast. I'll also say, in the in-between time, we were able to take a lovely literary trip to Concord, Massachusetts, and Boston and Salem.
I read this book on the train to Concord.
And it was a lovely time. If you are a reader, which I don't know why you're listening to this podcast if you're not.
Because they just like us so much, Rebecca.
Definitely recommend going to Concord, Massachusetts. It is a lovely place. It is a magical place. And we had a great time there.
And if you get on the train in Boston and are going to Concord, you can read most of Sarah Plain and Tall before you get to Concord.
See? You should go. We did not talk about what we're going to read next time.
No, so I'm making an executive decision here.
Okay, go ahead.
And you can veto this in the moment. We can have a fight now.
Wait.
Wait, what?
We're getting ahead of ourselves. I give this book 2 thumbs up.
Yeah, I also give it a thumbs up. I guess I thought that was kind of obvious
from
how we were talking.
It was a given, but we must say it. Okay.
Yes.
Yes, this is what we're reading next.
I just decided
I'm
because
so excited.
I realized about 5 minutes ago that we hadn't decided what our next book is. And so I just pulled up the list, and we're in the 90s next time.
This book.
I remember liking this book too, but I don't remember it very strongly. In 1991, the Newbery Medal went to a book called Maniac Magee, which is by Jerry Spinelli, and that I don't remember very much. The extent to which I don't remember it involves the first sentence of this book's description, the second sentence of this book's description in Wikipedia talks about it exploring themes of racism and inequality, which I do not remember whatsoever. Granted, I was like 9 when I read this book, so I was not, unfortunately, thinking about race and inequality very deeply at that time. Anyway, we shall see.
I hope it stands the test of time like Sarah Plain and Tall did.
Yes,
but everyone,
Magee, Maniac, and Unequal.
If you liked this book, really give Patricia MacLachlan more of your time. She will not let you down. Yeah, that's what I would say.
I would like to. Well, so that's the end of our episode, our shortest episode in a while. If you would like to contact us, you can hit us up at newberrychronicles@gmail.com. And until then, see you later.
Thanks for listening.